Okay, I'm going to do a redux of a presentation I did back in 2017 for a bunch of public school teachers in Hangzhou, China. The presentation was on authentic reading, which is a framework I developed while I was in New Taipei for a curriculum that we were developing for a CLIL program. And when I got to Hangzhou, I worked as academic director there for about 250 teachers over about 100 schools. And while many of them were kindergarten or lower primary, a good 30% of them were doing upper primary or middle school. And they struggled with, mostly being new teachers, struggled with how to plan their lessons. So I developed this lesson plan framework a little bit farther, and was asked to present it in front of these public school teachers for Hangzhou. Basically, as you can see here, it's a method for adapting authentic material to bilingual school settings, and we're trying to use research-based methods as much as possible. So there's going to be 4 parts to this. We're going to talk about authentic material and the benefits of it. Most teachers who've taught in the situation that I'm talking about have used EFL reading books, and some of these activities will resemble parts of things that happen in those books. But we're going to emphasize more having authentic material that's pulled from various sources that may not have progressive vocabulary, progressive sentence structures, etc., that we'll be studying, and how to get that kind of framework into some authentic material and why we might want to do it. How we find those materials. Daily 5 and Cafe, which are, at least at the time, were a popular reading lesson plan framework in use by lower elementary school teachers, and then the authentic reading method and how it connects to Daily 5 and does many of the same things. First part, why use authentic material? Authentic material is more motivating than constructed material. So the kinds of material that's normally in an EFL book for middle schoolers or upper elementary students who are fluent, not fluent, but more fluent than in that normal range, is more motivating. And we use more motivating things because motivation helps the student really read at a higher level. If they're motivated by the material, then they will attempt to read more with more comprehension, understand more than if they're not connected to the material. In addition, if they have some background in the topic, then they'll be able to understand more. And when they understand better, that means they read better, and they enjoy reading more, and they read more. Instead of trying to find some kind of generic, this is what teens like material, we can ask groups of teens to find that are in our class or preteens to tell us what they like, what they're interested in, and we can do some work on that once or twice a week. And often when we hit authentic material, one of the problems is that there's just a lot of vocabulary that the students don't know. There's a lot of sentence structures that the students aren't familiar with, and so they'll ask somebody to explain it in L1, which kind of defeats the purpose. But yeah, there is a good amount of research for bilingual teaching. Use L1 in support of L2. So L2 being English and L1 being Chinese or Thai or Korean or whatever it is. When we hit authentic material, we really need to be conscious of the idea of comprehensible input. And I haven't done a presentation here on comprehensible input on my channel, I think, yet, but I definitely will. But I'll give you a quick overview for it. As a student progresses in language learning, their language level goes up over time, and the kind of Goldilocks zone, not too hard, not too easy, keeps going up and up. That Goldilocks zone in comprehensible input terms is called I+1. So that's where we should be putting our kids. If we're lower down in the Goldilocks zone, the kids will be able to do independent reading really easily. That's good for an extensive reading program, which I covered a couple of videos ago, and I'll hit a bit at the end of this presentation. If we're at the edge of this zone, or even a little bit up into the red, that's where we're going to need to do an intensive reading program, which is authentic. Authentic reading is basically an intensive reading program, but streamlined so that we can get through as much material as possible instead of reading one article over 5 hours. We'll be doing one article over 2 hours in order to get more through more material, get more comprehension, and then build out the students' acquisition of the language. So if we get very far up into this red zone, pink zone, I guess, not really red, then the program is mostly incomprehensible. Student doesn't make any real growth because they're not acquiring the language, and our goal here is to help students acquire the language instead of just like memorize vocabulary or something like that. And from what I've seen, a lot of bilingual programs really push their kids up into this area so that they can look like they're doing more difficult material, impress the parents, impress outsiders, get some marketing, something like that. But it's really shooting themselves in the foot because the kids are going to have a lot of trouble progressing, and the time up here is pretty much wasted. Any class time up here far up in this red zone is basically wasted for the kids, and that they're not going to be progressing. If we get below this Goldilocks zone, I+1, we're completely within the student's abilities, so they're not going to really grow, but it can still build fluency. So we can still have fluency, but the kids aren't going to progress, really. How do we figure out what this Goldilocks zone is? And if we're going to have a course without a textbook, how do we figure what's right for our students? Well, there's a trick known as the five-finger rule, figuring out what's useful for independent study. And the five-finger rule talks about 5 words. Like I said, a lot of these are adapted from reading programs used for first grade, second grade kids. So what we do is we look at a page of text, whether it's be a beginning reader or an intermediate or an advanced. And if there are 0 to 1 new words, then it's too easy. 2 to 3, that's great for kids to independently read. 4 is a challenge level, so if the topic is interesting, the kid can probably get through it, and 5 is too difficult. So our authentic material needs to be at the top of this range, so somewhere probably about 5 words per page that the student doesn't know. And this is surprisingly robust across different text complexities, because as you can see here at the beginning, the page has very few words, so if they don't know 5 of these words, that's going to be pretty hard. But they have a lot of picture support. They have 1-to-1 text to picture support, so the context of the words is a lot easier to get. As we get up more into intermediate, we still have some picture support, but it's not 1-to-1. We have more words. So if we have 5 words on here with some basic picture support, then it's very likely, if we have 2 to 3 unknown words, then it's very likely that the student can get the meaning through context. And as we get up more advanced, we have very little picture support, and so 2 to 3 words out of a large number of words on a page is going to be as much as they can do, because there's no support for context. So basically, you need a lot more context for each word as you get higher and higher. There are more words on a page, but there are fewer pictures. So that's the 5-finger rule, and that's one way you can do it. We're going to talk about how to select it realistically. You can, of course, poll your kids and ask them how many words they don't understand on a page, but there are better ways to do that. And if you're using a a program, readtheory.org, which I highly suggest, then you can get a good Lexile estimate for your kids, each of kids, and you can have a Lexile estimate. Lexile is a measure of text complexity, so we'll figure out how long the average sentence is, whether it's what kind of grammar the sentences are using, how difficult the vocabulary is, what percentage of the vocabulary is considered difficult, and it will come up with a number. The number is between 0 and 1,500. But fluent readers, you'll see, will get up into the 1100s and 1200. A lot of the students that we're going to be teaching are going to be in the 900, 800, 1,000 range for this. And knowing the Lexile, estimated Lexile for that student tells you that there's a nice little range that they can work in. If you are selecting your material from readingatoz.com, which is paid, but very worth it, you can find that Lexile over here based on their level, and you can choose a few levels. So a sample, if we say that our students are reading at 650, we might choose level O and P here, possibly even Q and R, and look through the readers that they have. And then when we choose our level, we'll have a lot of books for them to choose from, readers to choose from. These are great. This is a great resource. readingatoz.com is mature. It's been around for, I think, over 20 years at this point, and every year they add more readers. All of their readers have real person reading audio, which is very important. If you get the RAS Kids, I think it is kind of hybrid or online version, then the students can have word tracking too, automatic word highlighting for word tracking as it's read to them. Most of our students have not heard many of these words before or are less familiar with them. They're not L1 speakers. They need this kind of listening support that's available in this kind of program. Another way you may get the material is to go to readworks.org. Readworks.org allows you to search by Lexile. You can search by a Lexile range, and then it will tell you the topic and whether it's informational or fiction, text, etc. And generally what grade level is available. So you can combine this Lexile and grade level to find find articles that have a lower text complexity, but because the grade level is at higher, the higher grade levels will have a topic that's more interesting to your students. Once you choose one, you'll be able to read it. You'll see that it has the Lexile level and the grade level. So here I've got 840, which is a pretty low Lexile level, but the grade level is 5. So if I'm teaching 7th graders, it's going to be a much more interesting article for them than if I choose 840 in grade 3 or grade 2 even. You can download and print these. They have vocabulary already highlighted, but I suggest you not use that. And they have a question set already put in there if that's something you want to use. Here are the QR codes and the websites for the 3 that are mentioned previously. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Daily 5 and Cafe. Introduce those to you so you can understand how authentic reading uses the same ideas, and not necessarily in the same order though. Cafe stands for Comprehension, Accuracy, Fluency, and Expanding Vocabulary. A lot of reading comprehension is not really about teaching reading comprehension. It's more about just practicing reading, discussing the article, discussing the story, and becoming familiar with the topics that the story is set in. The settings, the historical setting, the geographical setting, if it's fiction, or the topic, if it's informational text. Those are all really important. And every time that we read something, we're going to be expanding our vocabulary. Daily 5 refers to 5 different things that students need to do. Those things are Read to self, work on their writing, read to someone. This is important. Read out loud. They need to read out loud to someone. Could be the teacher, could be a peer. They need to listen to the reading, and they need to do word work. These may be in a slightly different order, and a lot of teachers will do what Ms. W has done here, which is tell a student that every week they need to complete a certain number of these steps for the books they're reading. So Lexia here is a kind of an online reading intervention program, hybrid reading, and very similar to reading A to Z, actually. So students will choose which ones they're doing that day, and they'll complete this organizer to show that they've done those parts. So let's go ahead and move on to authentic reading and what it is. Instead of having 5 steps, it has 7 steps. I'll talk about those steps. Those steps need to be done in order. This is primarily for upper primary and middle school students, but a lot of the students who are in public schools or not top tier bilingual schools, these students will have a limited amount of English. They won't be completely starters, but they're definitely not advanced or fluent. Somewhere in the B1 range probably is what we're looking here. If we have those kind of students, upper A2, lower B1, and you're a beginning teacher and you're not sure what to do with them, and you're hung out to dry, in essence, you can use this authentic reading. The 7 steps here, I'm going to put them in the context of the Daily 5. First step is to listen to others read. So our students don't know how to read. This is a mistake that a lot of beginning teachers make. They'll have a text and they want to replicate what they did in their reading class when they were younger, or what they were taught to do, maybe back in their own country with native English speakers, and say, okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go ahead and read this story. And that's not as effective as having those students listen to others read, because there will be a lot of words that they're not familiar with and they don't have the tools necessary to figure out how to pronounce them, or they might pronounce them heavily accented, which accent is not a problem, but we want the accent to be as comprehensible for most English speakers around the world as possible. So I never try to eliminate an accent from a student, but we do try to moderate that so that it's easier to understand. So either the teacher will read, or there will be an audio available. Readworks.org and readingatoz.com both have audio available. I encourage you to use those. And we'll ask the students to follow with their fingers. And this is a point of contention I get from some teachers because they feel it's babying their students. But especially middle school students have a propensity to drift off. And this, having students really drilling hard to have students finger track, follow the reading with their fingers, will help you as a teacher understand if they're tracking with you or if they've drifted off. And there's 2 reasons that they could drift off. One, they're not able to follow. They're not able to follow the audio. Or number 2, they've got something else on their mind. So, and there are different ways to deal with both of those. So that's the first. And generally, I do that twice. Generally, we have a shorter article. It can be read in about 3 minutes. We will read through that twice. If we don't have time, if you feel you don't have time, 1 is okay. 1 time is okay, but 2 is good. And then our second step here is that they're going to read to themselves. They'll read to themselves at their own pace, and the idea there is they're going to try to read a little bit slower and at their own pace, and identify the areas where they have limited comprehension. That may mean unfamiliar words, unfamiliar phrases, unfamiliar grammar, whatever it is. So I really don't understand this area, okay? And it's important to teach the skill to students, because a lot of students just don't have the skill where they they can reflect and say, yeah, I don't really understand this. They'll keep reading. They're used to not understanding. They can't step back and decide which sections they mostly understand and which sections they mostly don't understand and which sections they need to work on. That's a skill that needs to be practiced. So that's what we're doing there. Then we'll go to word work, which word work is normally towards the end of daily 5, but we want to get word work done here. So I'll tell you a couple of ways that I normally do that. Oh, I think I'm getting ahead. I have actually slides on each of these, but it's okay. We'll skip those slides a little bit later. For word work, we will, if it's a smaller class, somewhere 8 to 15 kids, something like that, we may share out the unfamiliar words on a board, ask students to come up and write their unfamiliar vocabulary, where it is, which line or which paragraph it's in, unfamiliar sentence patterns, something like that. And we'll work together as a class to define it. And then we'll make sure that they're noting the meaning in the article. I say book here, but in the article that we're reading. I like word walls. We will do some pronunciation work using word walls. Generally, we'll have that vocabulary up there, drill the vocabulary pronunciation, and then ask students to make 1 or 2 lines, come up and read those words out as I point to them. We may have games involving word meaning. I like cards, so if you can have students write down these words on scraps of paper, you can play quick games like Go Fish or Slap or something like that. Something that lightens up the class a little bit, but the students are still saying the word. You can structure those games. I like to structure them so that make sure that the students are actually pronouncing the words or pronouncing the words and matching word and meaning. You're welcome to use L1 in here, a language that the students are more fluent in, Chinese or Thai or Korean or Japanese or whatever it is. And this is a good place to get those pairings. After we finish that word work, we're going to go through back and listen to others read again. We'll reread the section and follow, again, finger track. And that should be the 3rd or 4th time that they've read this, and they should have good comprehension. And then we're going to go into a read to others step, where we'll group kids, small groups. We'll have a reading game of some kind, have them read out loud. There are lots of resources about this online, but you can ask students to read out loud. Okay, so then our step 6 comes to working on writing or speaking. I like to vary this up. I may do 2, or it depends on how fast my students are. If I can get through all 3 of these done during each class, I will, but we may choose one of those as students are getting used to the structure of this, and then be able to put in 2 once students get a little bit faster. So dictation, I'm a big fan of dictation. You can dictate parts of the article and require students to ask clarifying questions. We can have structured writing or speaking tasks. I'll highlight that a little bit later. Generally, we supply sentence stems on that are sourced from the article, and or free writing or speaking tasks. Once students are really comfortable with some of the structures and all of the vocabulary. Back in 2017, I really encouraged teachers to use some of the available online collocation dictionaries, which would tell students this vocabulary that we're learning right now. What are some of the most common, it's a noun, what are the most common adjectives that are used with it? So a collocation dictionary will tell you what kind of sentences, what kind of phrases this word is used in, and what are the modifiers. If it's a verb, what's the adverb, etc. What are the most common prepositions that are used with this verb? Those kinds of things. And I think that's really useful for a teacher to come out and work with a student on vocabulary to help them develop their writing and or their speaking. And our step 7 is an extensive reading. which we're not going to cover, but I have covered extensive reading in a previous article, and we talked a little bit about what extensive reading looks like. So this should be at that lower part of the green band here, 2 to 3 words on the 5-finger rule, and the student should be able to independently read, and should give about 10 minutes for them to deal with that. I'm going to go through and see if there's anything I missed. This program is best used in where it's just one of several subjects taught in English. You're not going to have full coverage of vocabulary or full coverage of grammar structures just using this authentic reading method. But this does promote reading comprehension, fluency, and accuracy. It is great at building vocabulary in a very authentic way. You do have speaking and writing components for productive skills, and it does help promote accuracy if you do it right. So I have an example here. I pulled a Lexile 490 grade 6. So if we're teaching grade 6, this is a good topic, but the Lexile is low, meaning it's accessible to many of our A2 students. It has some slang in here. You'll see what's up and jet lag and some other things like that. So there are some words that the students aren't going to get, but there's not that many. And our first step there would be to listen to the story. We'll do finger tracking. And on the first pass, the student should be able to understand most of the major events of the story, but they may not get the details or may be confused about some of the words like jet lag. So I'll probably read that twice. You can see this chat, probably email. I think it's set up as an email between Lexi and Mara answers Lexi. And then our step 2 is ask students to reread and highlight. So I've asked teachers to do that. Jet lag is probably one that they're going to get. Access, possibly. Nighttime, if they can't get that through context. Here we've got floating, Venice, possibly castles. So there are 5 or 6 words on this page that the students might not get. And then we'll come back and we'll work on that vocabulary. And in this case, I'll probably group the students and ask them to use online dictionaries or apps or something to come up with a quick definition and decide which of these, because there's always several translations, which of those translations probably works best in this reading. And then as a class, when we share out the definitions, then students can have a good class discussion about why one of these works and the other one probably doesn't work, and how to identify it. We can help give students that kind of meta. So here we did this as a whole. So our step 4 is to reread. Here we're going to read for comprehension now that all the students have the vocabulary and we've got definitions and they've copied that. I generally ask students if we've got paper that we're working on, that they write that translation above the word, and then when they go through and reread, they have it right there for themselves. All the things that they highlighted, they basically got the explanation in English or in their mother tongue. So at this point, they should comprehend 90% at least, if not 100, which is good enough. Repeated reading is one of the most effective methods. If you look at Hattie's research, repeated reading is an extremely effective method for getting fluency and comprehension. And I realize that at this point, the students have read this article 4 or 5 times. And you'll say, well, it's become boring. It probably has become slightly boring. That's because at this point they've understood the whole thing, and now we're ready to move on to step 5, which is reading for fluency and accuracy in a group setting. So we may put the kids in a circle like this and play some kind of game. I like to use games, except if I'm putting kids in groups of 6, then we'll give them a simple die, and students will once a student finishes a certain amount, or until I call to change, then they'll roll the die and figure out who's going next. Everybody has to track, everybody is finger tracking, and I walk around to check that everybody's on, or we can have some other kind of it's not that exciting or fun. Nobody's going to get out of control, but it's a little more interesting if there's some randomness involved instead of just reading around in a circle or something like that. We may look to really encourage intergroup competition. So within group, they're collaborative and helping each other, but we may have some intergroup competition there in a game, and that will help. Our step 6 is writing or speaking tasks. So the writing or speaking task that I chose for this article uses sentence stems, and I always allow students to go off script. Advanced students who feel like they want to do something that's more challenging for them, go ahead, you do you, but I want to make sure that we have that support for our lower kids so that they can successfully complete the task. They feel like they've been successful. That increases their motivation, then they're more involved in class. So here's an example of a writing prompt. With a partner, choose a city that you know something about and write a series of emails to your BFF about your visit there. Use sentence stems that we've practiced this week. And then I may once this writing is done, we'll do this writing in class, and we'll try to, it shouldn't take a long time. I'll circulate and help students complete the task if they get stuck. But then we may have what's in Teach Like a Champion 2 and 3. It's called show call, so I may choose some parts of the text that was written to highlight interesting things, which may be positive or maybe something that needs common error or something like that. But it's always framed positively. Hey, there's something here that I want to show how to fix. Don't worry, it's an error that a lot of people make, and I'm choosing it because it's an error that a lot of people make. I'm not highlighting somebody in order to call them out for doing a poor job or something. But in a lot of cases, I'll highlight something that is achievable for almost all of the students, but was done really well, so that other students can see what good product looks like, an achievably good product. So I'm probably not going to choose the top kid in the class every time who knows what they're doing and just writes without thinking about it. I'm going to choose somebody who struggled to get there, but still succeeded, and maybe have a little conversation with them about their choices in how they produce something so good despite the obstacles. And our step 7 is extensive reading. So I'll give them about 10 minutes. If students have longer texts than 10 minutes, then we may split that over a couple of days. But extensive reading, the important thing about extensive reading is it should be fast. It should be at a level that's really at the bottom of that green, as I pointed out, and students should be able to move through lots of text in a short amount of time in order to become fluent readers. Well, that's the system. Again, there are 7 steps. Step 6 has some different choices and moves from low complexity up to high complexity. So if you're doing this over a couple of periods, then we may ask the students to do 1 a day, or if you can get more done, you should get more done. So that's the authentic reading method. I want to thank you for listening to this presentation.